Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles. Growing up, I always felt like my parents were playing a role in a movie that only they were watching. My father, before meeting my mother, had already been married once and had a son, my older half-brother Clifton. Dad and his first wife divorced when Clifton was just 6 months old. My mother told me they simply weren't compatible, which always seemed like a convenient excuse. But despite their separation, Dad remained active in Clifton's life, sharing custody and making sure he was present. 2 years later, met my mom, and according to her, it was love at first sight. She loves telling the story how she was sitting in a coffee shop when my dad walked by, locked eyes with her, and without hesitation, walked in to ask her out. It was like something out of a romance novel, she would say, her eyes glowing with nostalgia. I just knew in that moment that he was the one. They dated for a few months. And then, in another grand romantic gesture, he proposed. I didn't even hesitate, she always adds with a dreamy sigh. I knew we were meant to be together. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Except reality had other plans. Just a year into their marriage, my dad cheated on my mom with a co-worker. It wasn't some long-drawn out affair. He confessed right away, eaten up by guilt. My mom, heartbroken but determined, decided to stay. Marriage isn't perfect, she told me once when I was old enough to understand people make mistakes. But what matters is if they're willing to fix them. So they went to marriage counseling work through their problems, or at least that's what they told themselves, and my mother convinced herself that having a baby would solidify their bond, and that, of course, is how I came into the picture. To this day, she considers their story romantic, as if overcoming an affair and deciding to have a child to fix things is some grand testament to love, but I've always seen it differently. My parents, for all their outward displays of affection, are anything but perfect. In fact, they might just be the most dysfunctional couple. I know they care too much about how they appear to others, desperate to maintain the illusion of the perfect marriage. Whenever we had guests over, they would put on a show, holding hands, sneaking kisses, laughing at each other's jokes as if they were still in the honeymoon. Face, oh, you two are just adorable. Guest would gush. What's your secret? Love, patience, and never going to bed. Angry, my mom would say, smiling, as she rested her head on Dad's shoulder. But I knew the truth. They weren't constantly wrapped up in each other at home, and their relationship wasn't some never-ending fairy tale behind closed doors. They were just like any other married couple, sometimes affectionate, sometimes annoyed with each other, but mostly just existing side by side. They weren't some perfect L-struck duo, not in the way they wanted everyone to believe. Looking back, I can see it. Now it was all just a show. My parents had built an image of the perfect couple, and for years I believed in it. It wasn't until I got older that I realized how much effort they put into maintaining that illusion, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them, including me. The pressure to be perfect didn't stop with their marriage. It extended to me as well. From the moment I was old enough to walk, my schedule was packed. Piano lessons on Mondays and Wednesdays, swimming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, chess club debate team, math, tutoring, public speaking, workshops, and God knows what else. My parents weren't just raising a child. They were molding a success story. My childhood wasn't about playing or relaxing. It was about achievements. I barely had time to breathe. It wasn't until high school that I finally put my foot down. I'm not a machine, I told them one evening at dinner. My voice, sharp than I intended. I can't keep doing this. My dad put down his fork, looking at me with that usual air of authority. It's for your own good. Tyler, he said, you'll thank us one day. My mom, as always, nodded in agreement. We just want what's best for you, sweetheart. But for once, I didn't back down. I just want some time to do nothing, I said, exasperated. Just one day where I don't have to be the best at something. To my surprise, they relented at least a little. They cut back on my extracurriculars, allowing me a bit of breathing room. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to realize how exhausted I had been. Of course, by then, the damage was done. My father had drilled into both me and Clifton that mediocrity was not an option. He made sure we were straight. A students excelling in everything we did. Clifton always, the obedient son, followed the plan to the letter. He got into one of the best medical schools in the country, while I ended up in an Ivy League college for business. The pressure was relentless, but I won't deny that it worked. We were both successful, though, at a cost. But my father's control didn't stop at academics or careers. He believed he had the right to dictate our personal lives as well. My mother, as usual, never questioned him. Whatever he said was law. When Clifton turned 30, Dad sat him down for a talk. "You're not getting any younger." He told him it's time to think about marriage. "You don't want to wake up one day and realize all the good women are taken." Clifton had been dating Kimberly, now his wife, for years at that point. They had an on-again, off-again relationship. But they had history. Dad had always known about her. But after that conversation, something changed. Clifton got serious. Within a year, he proposed. And soon after they were married, 3 years later, they had a baby, Clifton. And I aren't particularly close, so I didn't hear about any of this from him directly. Instead, I got the news from Dad himself. And earlier this year it became clear why. Because it was my turn. We were sitting in his study when he brought it up. "I had this conversation with your brother. When he turned 30, he began leaning back in his chair. And now it's time to have it with you." I sighed already, knowing where this was going. "You've built a great career," he continued. "You're successful, stable. But what's next? Do you really want to waste the best years of your life running around without a family?" I said nothing. So he went on, clearly pleased with himself. "Look at your brother. H-E-K. Happy. He's got a wife, a son, and do you know why?" He leaned forward, slightly smiling. "Because I helped him see what really matters. I convinced him to settle down, and now he is everything, and I want the same for you." My father had no idea how spectacularly his advice was going to backfire. He sat across from me in his study, wearing the same smug expression he always had when he thought he was imparting wisdom. He said, swirling the whiskey in his glass before you were born. I went through a rough patch. I was unfulfilled, lost. Even I knew where this was going. He had cheated on my mom a year into their marriage. It wasn't exactly a family secret, but it also wasn't something we ever talked about. "But committing to your mother having a child, that grounded me," he continued. "It gave me purpose, and that's what I want for you." He took a sip, eyed me over the rim of his glass. "Marriage and family, they make a man complete." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. My dad giving relationship advice, of all things the same man who had cheated on his wife and then convinced himself that a baby had fixed everything. I wasn't about to take his words seriously. I nodded along, pretending to listen, but in reality I had already made my decision. What he didn't know was that I had been planning to propose to Sharon anyway. We had been together for 3 years, living together for 2. And I already had the ring. My father thought he was steering me towards some grand realization. But in truth, he was just lucky enough to think he had influenced me. 2 months later, on my birthday, I finally did it. I took Sharon out to her favorite restaurant, the same one where we had our first date after dinner. We took a walk through the city, the streets glowing with warm, golden lights. It was there on the small bridge overlooking the river that I got down on one knee. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hands, her eyes shining. "Oh my God, Tyler, are you serious?" I smiled up at her, holding out the ring. Dead serious. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, of course, yes." She practically tackled me, kissing me over and over. People around us clapped and cheered, but all I could focus on was the warmth of her arms around me, the way she whispered, "I love you," against my lips. 3 months later, we were married. I thought everything was going well, but if it actually had been, I wouldn't be here telling story. We had only been married for 2 months when I had to file for divorce. A week ago, my entire world shattered when I found out that Sharon had been having an affair, and not just any affair, with Clifton. I never would have found out if it weren't for sheer dumb luck that night. Sharon wasn't home. I was looking for one of my shirts, one I knew I had just worn, but couldn't find anywhere. I searched the laundry basket, the closet, the drawers. Nothing. Frustrated, I decided to check Sharon's clothes, thinking maybe she had mixed it up with hers by accident. I was rifling through one of her drawers when I felt something in the pocket of a pair of jeans, small, rectangular, a phone. A burner phone, my heart, slammed against my ribs. I pulled it out, my hand slightly unsteady, as I turned it on. No password. The screen lit up instantly. There was only one text thread. I clicked on it, and the moment I saw the number, my stomach dropped. The number looked familiar, and sure enough it was Clifton's phone number. I was horrified. And yet I kept scrolling. I don't know why. Maybe some sick part of me needed to see just how deep the betrayal ran. Maybe I hoped that at some point I'd find a message where she hesitated, where she said, "We can't do this," and meant it, but there was nothing like that. The text started about 3 weeks after I proposed, flirty, at first playful, like two teenagers testing the waters, but soon they became something else. The teasing turned into, "I miss yous," into, "I can't stop thinking about you," into, "I love you." I stared at the screen, my hands numb. A few months after our engagement, they had confessed their love for each other. Love, the word, made me sick. They had promised to stick it out no matter what, as if they were some star-crossed lovers trapped in tragic circumstances instead of two lying, cheating snakes who had done this to themselves. And the worst part, they had a plan, a 5-year plan. Sharon and Clifton had agreed to stay with their respective partners until my nephew turned 5, until he didn't need his mother as much. Then, and only then, would they finally come clean. They would divorce Kimberly and me, pretend like it was all just unfortunate timing, and finally be together like they were meant to be. All along my stomach twisted as I read on. They had talked about it like it was some grand noble sacrifice, as if lying to us for half a decade was the most selfless thing they could do. Sharon had even written, "I hate hurting him like this, but we need to do it this way. It's for the best, for the best." I clenched my jaw, my vision blurring with pure rage. I needed to get out of here. Moving on autopilot, I started throwing my things into a bag. Sharon wouldn't be home until late out with her friends, or so she had told me. I didn't care where she actually was. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her voice, listen to whatever pathetic excuses she would come up with. I packed as much as I could, stuffing clothes, toiletries, anything I could grab into my duffel. Then, before I left, I took as many screenshots as possible. I wasn't about to let them gaslight me, tell me I had misunderstood, that it wasn't what it looked. Like when I was done, I placed the burner phone right in the center of our bed. No note, no message. She'd know exactly what it meant. I grabbed my bag and walked out. Barely able to breathe, I drove aimlessly for a while. It wasn't just the betrayal that made me sick. It was how long it had been going on. Sharon and Clifton had been together since the night of my engagement. I could still remember that night perfectly. The way I had smiled at Sharon as I slid the ring onto her finger, the way she had kissed me in front of our family and friends, the way Clifton had clapped me on the back, congratulating me like a proud older brother. And the entire time behind my back, they had been sneaking off together. I gritted my teeth, gripping the wheel even tighter as the memory played in my head. I had noticed Sharon was missing for a little while that night. I hadn't thought much of it. Maybe she was freshening up her makeup or taking a quiet moment away from the crowd I hadn't wanted. To be one of those controlling guys who questioned his fiancé's every move, but now, reading through their texts, it was obvious what had really happened. They had made out in the backyard of my house while I was inside, celebrating us while I was surrounded by friends and family, feeling like the luckiest guy in the world. Sharon had been outside with my brother, her hands in his hair, his hands on her waist. I slammed my foot on the gas, barely able to see through the red haze of fury clouding my vision. And what made it even worse, Clifton wasn't just my brother. He also happened to be the father of a child that evening. I called my lawyer. "I want to file for divorce," I said, my voice steady. despite the storm raging inside me. There was a brief silence on the other end before he responded. "All right, Tyler, I'll start preparing the paperwork. Is there anything specific you want to discuss?" "Yes," I said. "I don't want Sharon to get a damn thing out of this. No alimony. No settlement. Nothing." "I understand," he replied. "Given your financial position, she might try to push for something, but we can fight it. Do you have any evidence of her affair?" I glanced at my phone at the screenshots I had taken. Evidence I had more than enough. I had an entire digital record of her betrayal, every disgusting message, every plan she and Clifton had made behind my back. "Oh, I have plenty," I said. "Lie." I hung up feeling slightly better, knowing that I was taking action. But my stomach turned again when I thought back to those texts she had mocked me. Not just betrayed me, mocked me. Scrolling through the messages had felt like peeling back layers of an elaborate deception. I had always known Sharon had materialistic tendencies, but I hadn't realized just how deep her superficiality ran. In one message to Clifton she had written, "God, I wish you were a doctor instead of my glorified accountant of a fiancé, but at least in 5 years I'll finally get to upgrade glorified accountant for the record." I ran my own business, a successful one. I had co-founded it with 2 of my business school buddies years ago, and we had built it from the ground up. I handled the finances, and we were doing better than. I made significantly more than Sharon, who was just another cog in the corporate machine. Yet she had the audacity to look down on me. It was pathetic. They had laughed about me behind my back, ridiculed me like I was some fool oblivious to reality. The joke's on them now, I thought bitterly, and Clifton. I was beginning to hate Clifton. We had never been close, but I had never seen him as an enemy, either. Now I wanted nothing more than to destroy whatever fantasy life he thought he was going to have with Sharon. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself forever. Kimberly deserved to know she was married to a lying, cheating bastard, and sooner or later I would have to tell her. But right now, I wasn't ready. I was in a dark place, barely keeping myself together. The weight of the betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer rage, it was all too much. So I blocked them both. Sharon, Clifton, everywhere. I wasn't going to listen to their pathetic excuses, their desperate attempts at damage control. I was done for 2 days. I stayed in my hotel room, waiting, not for reconciliation, God, no, but for at least one of them to have the sense to apologize. Not that it would change anything, but I thought that maybe they would acknowledge the sheer cruelty of what they had done. But there was nothing, no texts, no calls, no messages left at the hotel. And then, on the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was my father. I hesitated before answering, gripping the phone tightly. Did Clifton tell him? Was this going to be some guilt-tripping lecture about keeping the family together? Still, I answered, "Hello, Tyler." My father said, his voice heavy. "I heard about what happened." I exhaled slowly, gripping the bridge of my nose. "Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened to you." Something in my chest loosened just slightly. Maybe for once my father was actually going to take my side. Maybe he understood how devastating this was for me. But then he continued, I need to ask something of you." I frowned. "What?" "I think it would be best if you kept this to yourself," he said carefully. "At least for now. Don't talk about it just yet." I already knew why my father had called, but I still asked just to hear him say it out loud before responding. I reached for my other phone, the one I had bought specifically to handle things without interference. I opened the recording app and hit record if they were going to try and manipulate me. I wanted every single word on record. "So tell me, Dad," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Why exactly? Do you want me to stay quiet about this?" There was a pause and a sigh. "I spoke to Clifton," he admitted. "And, well, we both worried about the same thing." I clenched my jaw already, knowing where this was going. "You're afraid I'll tell Kimberly," I stated. Flatly, there was a brief silence before he confirmed, "Yes, of course. Of course it wasn't about me, about what had been done to me." It was about Clifton and the mess he had gotten himself into. You see, Tyler? My father continued, his tone shifting into something almost pleading. Clifton has a family, he has a child. If you tell Kimberly about this, it could ruin his life. He's terrified that she'll use her power and influence to take everything from him. Full custody, their home, their connections. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so now he's worried about losing his family. Where was that concern when he was screwing my wife, Tyler? Listen, no, you listen, I snapped. You're asking me to stay silent, so he doesn't have to face the consequences of his actions. You expect me to protect him. I know this is hard, my father said quickly, but your mother and I both feel that telling Kimberly won't do any good. What's done is done. Clifton made a mistake and he regrets it. We spoke to him and he promised to stop seeing Sharon. It's over. Tyler. I scoffed, and I'm just supposed to believe that he suddenly grew a conscience. He swore it. My father insisted. And if you wanted to, you could still fix things with Sharon. You could try to make it work. My grip on the phone tightened. Make it work. Fix things. I repeated, incredulous. Are you serious, Tyler? Your mother and I have been through rough patches too? He continued, oblivious to the anger rising in my voice. There were times when I made mistakes, but your mother forgave me and we moved past it. Our marriage turned out beautiful in the end because we chose to fight for it. My stomach twisted in disgust. I had suspected my father wasn't the most faithful man, but hearing it, confirmed like this, hearing him use it as some kind of example for me to follow. You think what Clifton and Sharon did was just some stupid little mistake? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. They sorry, Tyler, he said earnestly. They truly are. I exhaled, sharply shaking my head. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You, Mom, and Clifton, the man who slept with my wife behind my back, are all in agreement that I should just let this go for his sake. My father hesitated. We just think it's best for everyone. I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound, everyone except me. Another silence. I had heard enough without another word. I ended the call and hung up. I was done recording. I was done with this conversation. I refused to digify. Their audacity with a response. I was absolutely fuming. I had always known that my parents cared more about appearances than anything else. But this was a whole new level of madness, the sheer audacity. Of it all, the expectation that I would just shut up and let Clifton get away with everything made my blood boil. I wish I could say I was surprised. But honestly, the cheating apple doesn't fall far from the cheating tree. Of course, my father wanted me to keep quiet. He probably saw a little too much of himself in Clifton. Maybe he thought he was saving his own reputation as much as he was trying to save my brother's. They wanted me to brush it all under the rug, pretend like nothing had happened, and continue this farce of a normal family. But worse than that, they actually had the nerve to suggest I forgive Sharon and Clifton, that I somehow find it in myself to patch things up with my cheating wife, like I was supposed to smile, nod, and go back to playing happy families so they wouldn't have to deal with the fallout out. It was insulting. The anger was burning hot in my chest, and before I even had time to second-guess myself, I grabbed my phone and started typing, "Hey, Kimberly, there's something you need to know." I didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. I laid it all out for her. The affair, how long it had been going on, how Clifton had been laughing behind her back with my wife, how they had made a complete joke of both of us, and just to make sure there was no way Clifton could lie his way out of it. I attached the screenshots from the burner phone, but I wasn't done. Oh, and in case you were wondering, my dad called me today. Apparently Clifton begged him to convince me to stay quiet about all this. They don't want you to know. They think you'll use your connections to get full custody, and he doesn't want to risk losing his son. So instead of facing the consequences, like a man, he ran to Daddy for help. I hit send before I could even think twice about it. Then, without hesitation, I powered my phone off. I didn't want to hear whatever excuses were coming my way. I didn't want to deal with my parents calling to scold me for airing dirty laundry. I wanted them all to fee this to deal with the mess they had created. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief I didn't know them. My silence a couple of hours later, when I figured the storm had truly begun, I finally turned my phone back on. As expected, it immediately started blowing up, with messages and missed calls. My mom, my dad, a few of my cousins, even an uncle who I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored every single one of them. Instead, I scrolled straight to the one person whose response actually mattered. Kimberly. Her message was short, almost unsettlingly. "So thank you for telling me the truth. Tyler, I know what to do now." That was it. No rage, no panic. Just a quiet, calm acknowledgement. I wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but something about it felt ominous. I didn't have to wonder for long because, as I kept scrolling through the unread messages from my family, I quickly figured out exactly what she had done. Apparently, as soon as she read my message, Kimberly confronted Clifton, and it wasn't just some argument. It was a full-blown, no-holds-barred knockdown, EEF. And in the end, Kimberly did exactly what Clifton had been afraid of all along. She packed her bags, took their son, and left to go stay with her parents in the aftermath of that explosive fight between Kimberly and Clifton. One thing became painfully obvious. Divorce was very much on the table. Kimberly wasn't just angry, she was done, and knowing how fiercely protective she was over their son. I had no doubt in my mind that she would fight tooth and nail for full custody, which was bad for Clifton, because even if he somehow managed to get shared custody, Kimberly would make damn sure that his time with their son was as limited as legally possible. And honestly, he had no one to blame but himself. But for some reason, my family disagreed. Somehow. This was all my fault. I had been bombarded with angry messages for the past few days. Everyone treating me like I had personally torn apart a happy family, as if Clifton wasn't the one who had wrecked his own marriage. If they didn't want any of this to happen, maybe they should have taught Clifton not to cheat, but they didn't. And now they were blaming me for exposing what he had done, instead of blaming him for doing it in the first place. The hypocrisy was astounding, Dad. You just had to get involved, didn't you? You couldn't just let it be. Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined a family, Nosy Ann. Kimberly is going to take that baby away from him, and it's going to be your fault. I didn't even bother responding. I just read the messages, rolled my eyes, and went on with my day. Because let's be real, if Clifton and Kimberly had been such a happy family, then maybe Clifton wouldn't have been sneaking around with my wife behind her back. But whatever, I knew I was right. I knew I had done the right thing. But for some reason, I still felt off. Not guilty, just weird, because while I couldn't care less about Clifton being miserable, the idea of him actually losing his son made me uncomfortable with Sharon. It was easy. There were no kids involved, no complicated custody battles. She cheated, I left, that was it. But for Clifton, it was different. And I didn't know how to feel about that now. It's been almost a week since I sent that text, and things have finally started to quiet down. Mostly because I've blocked everyone, no more guilt-tripping messages, no more people trying to make me feel like the villain in this situation. The only person I haven't blocked is Sharon. And that's only because we're about to start the divorce proceedings, but of course she's using that window to try and talk to me. Tyler, please, can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about. I wasn't thinking straight. I made a mistake. I hate that I hurt you. She keeps saying she's sorry, keeps trying to explain herself like any of it will make a difference. But I don't care. I don't feel anything for her anymore. Not anger, not sadness, not regret. Just nothing. If anything, I think it's great that she cheated, because in the end she saved me from wasting even more of my time with her. I couldn't imagine being married to Sharon for another year. Hell, even a few more months only to find out she'd been cheating on me. All along the thought made me sick. Or worse, what if she had gotten away with it? What if her little scheme had worked And we'd stayed together for 5 years before I uncovered the truth. The betrayal would have destroyed me, so as much as this entire situation had been a nightmare, I was really trying to put a positive spin on it. Maybe this was a blessing in disguise. Maybe I had dodged a bullet because someone who could look me in the eye, say, "I do," and then turn around and make out with my own half-brother. That person was never meant for me. I had been wrong about her, and for once I was glad that I was right. Now, I was still holed up in the hotel, grateful that no one had found me yet. It was only a matter of time. Though I wasn't stupid there. There weren't many hotels around, and my family had already searched through the city. Sooner or later they tracked me down. But until then I was making the most of my solitude, working remotely and keeping to myself. It was lonely, strange, but I preferred this over facing my families. The only thing on my mind now was the divorce. Sharon had already been served, but she hadn't responded yet. I figured she was just holding out hope, thinking if she'd beg long enough I'd cave. She was wrong, and she was going to find that out the hard way. 3 days later, I should have known. Peace wouldn't last forever. Sure enough, my dad and Clifton had finally managed to track me down. I had done my best to stay hidden, but once they realized, wasn't in any of the hotels in the city, they started expanding their search, and it didn't take long before they spotted my car parked outside this hotel. I had already given the front desk staff a heads up, letting them know that if anyone came looking for me, they weren't supposed to say I was here. They tried to stick to the plan, but my dad and Clifton weren't having it. They stormed into the lobby demanding answers when the receptionist insisted that no one by that name was staying at the hotel. They lost their minds. They started shouting, cursing, making a huge scene. It got so bad that security had to step in and cal me down to deal with it. I was pissed. I had no idea what they even wanted. At this point, the damage was already done. Kimberly knew the truth. What was the point of all this? Still, I stepped outside where security had already forced them out of the building. What the hell do you guys want? We need to talk, and don't give us attitude. Tyler, you've already done enough damage, I scoffed, crossing my arms. Right. Because all of this is somehow my fault. Clifton spoke. Look, man, we came up with a way for you to fix this that caught me off guard. Fix this, Dad. Started, yes, we have a solution. A way for you to make up for what you've done. I stared at them dumbfounded. What kind of ridiculous plan had they cooked up this time? Clifton added, You're going to be called to testify against Kimberly in court. My stomach twisted. Excuse me, Dad spoke. All you have to do would say a few things to make her look like an unstable wife and mother. That way the judge will see why Clifton had no choice but to cheat. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You're kidding. I'm serious, Tyler. If you do this, I can get full custody. I stood there staring at my father and Clifton like they had completely lost their minds. They had just told me their so-called solution, that I needed to testify in court and lie about Kimberly painting her as an unstable wife and mother, and for what? So that Clifton, the guy who had been screwing my wife behind my back, could get full custody of his son. Unbelievable. Dad must have mistaken my silence for consideration because he kept going. Things aren't looking good for him? Tyler, he said, shaking his head. Kimberly's already got a strong case, check. Not just coming after him for cheating. She has a whole list of complaints that make him look like a bad father. Clifton sighed, rubbing his face like he was the victim. In all of this, she's twisting everything against me, he muttered, making it seem like I was never around. But come on, I had a life too. I was working. I was tired. She knew that. I raised an eyebrow. Right? And by working, you mean sneaking around with Sharon, huh? He ignored that. Dad cleared his throat. Kimberly saying that you knew he was barely home, but you didn't realize why. And now she's claiming that even when he was home, he did nothing to help with the baby. No diaper changes, no feeding, no getting up at night. And I asked, crossing my arms. Clifton groaned. She's acting like that makes me a bad father. Like I don't love my son. But it's not like that, man. I was just exhausted. And besides, a mother's supposed to handle those things. She was fine with it before the baby. So why did she suddenly expect me to step up? I scoffed. You can't be serious. Dad jumped in again, desperate look. She's trying to spin this to make it seem like Clifton was neglectful, and she wants out of the marriage fast. If she gets full custody, she'll cut him out of his son's life. I stared at them both, trying to process the sheer audacity of what they were asking me to do. They really thought that after everything I'd stand up in court and lie for them, that I'd help him, the guy who had been sleeping with my wife, to win against a woman who actually deserved to walk away. If anything, what they just told me confirmed that I had done the right thing by exposing them. Kimberly was better off without Clifton. And as for me, I didn't know either of them. A damn thing. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You really think I'd help you? I said, voice low and cold. After everything. Clifton shifted, uncomfortably looking away. My dad, on the other hand, hardened his expression. Tyler, you need to understand. No, you need to understand. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You two mean nothing to me. I don't owe you anything, and I'm sure as hell not lying for you. Their faces dropped, but I didn't care. I turned on my heel and walked away without waiting for a response, because nothing they could say would change my mind before heading back inside. I gave the security guards strict instructions: if they show up here again, throw them out. I don't want them anywhere near me. The guard, still irritated from the earlier scene, nodded, understood, stood, want me to mark them as a safety risk. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, call them dangerous if you have to. That was enough to get them officially kicked off the property. Later, I had to apologize to the hotel staff for the commotion. Though they reassured me they had seen worse, the only reason the police hadn't been called was because my father and Clifton clearly didn't want the bad press. Otherwise, they definitely would have been arrested for their outburst. At least now I could finally breathe again. Or so I thought. It had only been 2 days since that whole mess, and while I hadn't heard a peep from my dad or Clifton since Sharon had started texting me a lot, I didn't know why. We had already set a date for the first meeting with a court-appointed mediator. It was happening next week. She wasn't even contesting the divorce. So what the hell did she still want from me? I hadn't opened a single one of her messages, and honestly, I didn't have the bandwidth to deal with all this drama anymore. I knew exactly what Sharon's text would say, which was why I hadn't bothered to open them. It was always the same old, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this to you, honestly, it was all. If she was truly sorry, she would have made more of an effort to reach out in a way that actually mattered. She knew I wasn't much of a texting person. If she had really wanted to talk, she would have called me better. Yet she wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Up until a few days ago, she had been limiting herself to 2 texts per day. Just enough to ease whatever guilt she was feeling, but not enough to actually mean anything. But now she was texting me almost every hour. I still didn't have the energy or the mental strength to open the chat and deal with whatever she had to say. But at the same time, a small part of me wondered if it was something important. So after putting it off for as long as I could, I finally gave in. I opened the messages. And what I found was interesting. Apparently, Sharon had ended things with Clifton. She had finally realized what I had known all along, that for him it was never about love. It was just sex. Nothing more. Nothing less. Her messages were long, full of emotional rambling about how she had truly cared for him, how she had believed in all the promises he made, and how when they finally had a real conversation about their so-called future, she had found out that he hadn't meant a single word of it. He had never planned to be with her. He had never loved her. He had just said whatever was convenient to keep her around. I could almost hear the heartbreak in her words, the disbelief and disappointment. But all I felt was a dull sense of indifference. She had done this to herself, and now she was trying to make things right in the only way she knew how, by conceding everything in the divorce. I'm not going to contest. Anything she wrote I won't ask for a settlement or alimony. I don't deserve it. At least that was one problem solved. There would be no long drawn-out battle, no court fights, no unnecessary headaches. She had made her bed, and now she was lying. In it, I stared at the messages for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything. What was there to say? I told you so. That seemed too petty. Even for me, you should have known better. She already did, or maybe I don't care. But if that were true, I wouldn't be thinking this hard about it in the end. I just locked my phone and set it aside. It was sad in a way, but at the same time, she kind of had it coming. What the hell was she thinking? Getting involved with a married man, and not just any married man, a man with a child, especially when she was engaged herself. It was reckless. It was selfish. It was stupid. But in the end, it all worked out well for me. So, I don't have any complaints. Honestly, I was glad I had finally checked Sharon's messages. Not because I cared about what she had to say, but because it just made things easier for me. Her admission, her guilt, her regret, her willingness to concede everything meant that I wouldn't have to fight as hard as I originally thought. I forwarded all her texts to my lawyer just to have them on record and even save screenshots in case I needed them later. I wasn't taking any chances. It's been a couple of months since I last posted, and in that time, my life has changed. Drastically, the divorce went smoother than expected once the mandatory 90-day waiting period was over. The legal process moved quickly. Sharon had already promised not to contest anything, and she stuck to her word. In the end, she only got to keep the thing she had bought for herself while I walked away with everything else, including the house I moved back in a week after the divorce was finalized. Walking through the front door again felt strange. It was still my house, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Too many memories lingered in the air. Memories I had tried to bury. I stood in the living room for a long time, just staring. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, but everything felt different. I sighed and muttered to myself, "Guess I've got some redecorating to do." And I did. I got rid of anything that reminded me of her new furniture, fresh paint. Hell, I even changed the damn shower curtain, anything to make the space mine again. Meanwhile, Clifton and Kimberly's divorce was turning ugly from what I heard. The custody battle over their son was a mess. Clifton was trying to paint Kimberly as an unfit mother, but she wasn't backing down. I couldn't say I felt bad for Clifton. He deserved whatever was coming his way, but I did feel bad for my nephew. He was just a kid caught in the middle of all this. Then one day I got an unexpected message from Kimberly. "Kimberly, hey, I just wanted to let you know, you can still see him if you want. He misses you." I stared at the message for a moment, a small smile forming on my lips. That was a huge win for me. I really liked the little guy, and the thought of never seeing him again had weighed on me, more than I realized. I texted her back immediately, "Me thanks, Kimberly. That means a lot. I wasn't going to let my personal issues with Clifton affect my relationship with his son, and one day I would have a kid of my own. Definitely not with Sharon. Though that chapter was closed for now, I'm just focusing on rebuilding. My life so far, things are going well. I just hope they continue to go well." Afterward as well, dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.